What's up, Nashville? This is Beau with the Free Speech Podcast. We are going to cover the top stories from the week in Nashville: commercial real estate, business, culture, and perhaps even a little politics and sports mixed in. I'm going to give you a quick rundown of the topics, the stories we're going to cover on today's show. First, a developer, a big developer, a qualified developer, a well-capitalized developer takes a $5 million loss on a piece of land they bought for new development. I'll tell you that story. Why are bowling alleys disappearing? And what can we expect in the future in that segment? Next, very quickly, a Nashville economic outlook update. Next, lender set to buy Buca di Beppo. I hope I'm saying that right. An Italian eatery that's just been taken over by its lender, which is unusual. A 25 basis point federal funds rate cut. I'll explain to you what that means and what that could mean for our local commercial real estate marketplace. Next, a Broadway office building that sold for $16.5 million in 2021 is now relisted without any improvements for $34 million. I'll tell you that story and what you can expect to see happen there. 15 years and $6.9 billion. Nashville's new transit plan. Don't expect to see any type of improvement soon. I'm going to walk you through those timelines. Nashville is not oversupplied with apartments. So there are some indicators that are telling developers that we're oversupplied. I'm going to explain to you why that may not be the case. And lastly, Hyatt's new brand is all about construction costs. And of all of the big hotel brands and their sub-brands, never once have I heard a hotel brand designing a new concept based on its cost to construct. So very interesting. I'm going to tell you that story. Let's get into it. A developer takes a $5 million loss. You rarely hear that happen, especially in a market like Nashville. An 8-parcel Midtown site previously planned for a mixed-use project has sold for $10 million, with the seller taking a $5 million loss in the process. The seller was Minnesota-based Roars Companies, which paid $15 million for the properties in December 2022. With a collective 1.2 acres, the parcels offer addresses at 210 to 224 15th Avenue North and 1414 Church Street. Roars previously eyed 2 towers for the site, not just 2 towers, 2 absolutely massive towers, before scrapping the plan and listing the property for sale in late 2023. In January 2023, Roars landed the Metro Planning Commission specific plan rezoning, right? So specific plan rezoning has become very popular in Nashville. I'll explain to you real quick. You know, every parcel of dirt in Metro Nashville has zoning attached to it. If you are the owner of that piece of dirt and you don't like the zoning that you have, the one way to get around it is generally not to rezone the parcel, but is to seek specific plan zoning whereby you fully define how you want to use that land and get approval on your specific use. So very, very common in Nashville today. So they landed specific plan rezoning that would have allowed them to build a 375-room, 30-story hotel at the 1414 Church Street site, adjacent to the structure that is home to Deja Vu Showgirls, which I assume is a strip club of some kind. In addition, a mixed-use high-rise, so 2 towers, the second tower being a mixed-use high-rise with up to 570 residential units and 26,000 square feet of retail space with as many as 30 floors for the remainder of the site. So 2 absolutely massive 30-story towers, planned, approved. The developer, instead of proceeding with that plan, decided to put the property back on the market and take a $5 million loss. That is a real head scratcher. We don't know why that Minnesota developer really abandoned the project the way they did, but I do know that the owner of the parcel now is the neighboring Deja Vu Showgirls owner. So the folks that own that business shelled out $10 million for the adjacent 1.2 acres. Anytime you see a developer lock in a $5 million loss when they actually received specific plan rezoning for the site, that is unusual and worthy of mentioning on today's show. Now, for all the bowlers out there, why are bowling alleys disappearing? It's an industry that's been squeezed by rising costs, new competition for consumer leisure dollars, and real estate developers in search of more lucrative site projects. The number of bowling centers in business has fallen from 4,600 in 2005 to 3,100 this year, a 32% decline since 2005. League bowling as a share of revenue has declined, putting pressure on bowling centers to attract more casual players. That, however, puts them in competition with any number of indoor family entertainment options, from standalone arcades to indoor golf driving ranges. On the expense side of the ledger, operating costs continue to go up. The COVID-19 pandemic, so-called pandemic, which drove many people away from bowling centers in favor of outdoor activities such as golf, led to a degree of consolidation in the industry, with a few select companies hoping economies of scale could help boost profits as they chased upscale clients. Modern entertainment venues like Topgolf, which cater to an upscale clientele with more disposable income, are replacing traditional bowling alleys. Now, one of the big owners in that space, Bowleroo, senses an opportunity. Bowleroo has been on nothing short of a buying spree in recent years. Bowleroo acquired the Professional Bowlers Association, Bowl America, Zodo's Bowling and Beyond, and Lucky Strike Entertainment. It has also become a publicly traded company in 2021. They have grown to almost 350 locations. When Bowleroo buys the location, usually for around $2 to $3 million, it invests substantially in that site. By comparison, when the company develops its own new location, it usually spends about $8 million on the site. That development often includes the addition of an arcade. Bowleroo reports about $110 million in arcade revenue annually. The company also will renovate a site's TV and audiovisual experiences and work to create what overall is a more welcoming space. Bowleroo is now rolling out a revamped menu across all its locations. So what does the future look like for bowling? I think it's very bright for those who are able to evolve, said the owner of Bowleroo. That means installing ordering kiosks for customers to use. Season passes are a way to ensure repeat business. Corporate leagues offer an opportunity for growth, with businesses buying up lanes for their employees to relax and have fun. So I don't think you should expect the bowling business to grow, right? I think what we can most hope for is for the rate of decline in that business to kind of level off, right? We need to find the appropriate amount of bowling alleys. Those bowling alleys need to reinvest in their business to stay relevant, and we just need to hold on to as many bowling alleys as we possibly can. But over time, I do think that number will continue to tick down lower and lower and lower, as many of those owners of bowling alleys do not have the ability to borrow money to reinvest in their centers to kind of bring them up to a condition that will attract a higher clientele. You'll see many bowling alleys adding arcades, perhaps adding go-kart races, some type of golf concepts. They're trying to become a more well-rounded family entertainment center. I think that is probably the future. If you're offering bowling and only bowling, you better be doing so in a way that excites people, because the old school bowling lanes, I don't think are going to cut it much longer. As competition gets greater and fewer bowling alleys exist, I don't see this as a business that I want to be in. I think it's going to be challenging and capital intensive, and I wish them all the best. I hope they can make it work. I grew up bowling, not very often, of course, but when I did, I look back fondly on bowling. I think of my childhood, so I hope they will be around for our children for generations to come. Let's keep moving. A Nashville economic outlook from some of our industry leaders. I'm going to read you some bullet points here. If Nashville's growth were a baseball game, we'd be in the second or third inning, which means we're very, very early in the process of growing Nashville, which I think probably surprises some people given all the growth we've had in the last 10 years. Nashville's growth is here to stay, but what once fueled the city's growth may look different today. The city's growth was previously fueled by its ability to attract highly skilled talent at a low cost of doing business, grounded in a low cost of living. And that's the part that has changed, right? The low cost of living. The city is no longer an inexpensive place to bring in top talent, and as the cost of living for individuals shifts, what fuels the growth needs to shift with it. Nashville has finally grown to be taken seriously as a metropolitan area. Nashville is becoming a leading tech hub. All the tailwinds that existed pre-COVID that drove Nashville's growth are still here. It's hard to imagine a future in which Nashville doesn't continue to outperform its peer cities. So I think the most interesting aspect of that perspective is that we're in the second or third inning, and I think the folks that have been around for all of the growth that we've experienced in Nashville and its surrounding counties, I think that is a very interesting perspective to have, because we've already come a long way to only be in the second or third inning. Imagine what the 7th, 8th, 9th inning look like for Nashville. It's an exciting place to be. It's a great place to be in business. It's a great place to raise a family. It's got the correct politics. It's got beautiful scenery, friendly people, and a pretty temperate climate, even though that's hard to say today, where it is gray and raining outside our office. Nashville, a wonderful place to be. I would bet all my money on Nashville. In fact, I kind of have. So I'm very high on Nashville. I think we have a long way to go. And if you think things are getting expensive now, buckle up, because they're only going to go higher. It's a function of supply and demand for Nashville is very, very high. Lender set to buy Buca di Beppo. A judge approved plans by operators of Buca to sell the restaurant chain to lender Main Street Capital for $27 million. The full-service casual dining chain filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection in August, as it also closed 20 underperforming restaurants. Main Street, which is based in Houston, Texas, previously provided Buca with $36.3 million in debtor financing to support it through the bankruptcy process. Orlando, Florida-based Buca is now expected to emerge from bankruptcy with 44 units still in operation. New owner Main Street has investments in several industries, including dining chains that include primarily regional operators such as Tin Roof, Cafe Brazil, and New York Pizza Department. So this is a lender who has done this before, obviously. You have to be sophisticated and experienced and have deep pockets to be borrowing money to businesses coming out of bankruptcy. That's a risky proposition. You have to be willing to take over those assets and those operations if they can't perform. This lender is uniquely positioned to do that, as you can see by their other similar holdings. So I do think there is a path forward for the Buca brand. We'll see what Main Street can do with it. You know, we've had so many restaurants close this year. I'd hate to see too many more go dark. I don't think that's good for anyone. So good luck to Main Street and their revitalization of Buca di Beppo, which I hope I'm saying right. Next, the Federal Reserve recently announced a 25 basis point federal rate cut. Previously, the Fed cut the rate by 0.5 percentage point in September, a move that was highly anticipated in real estate circles and other industries after rates increased 11 times from early 2022 to mid-2023 to cool inflation that was absolutely caused by obscene government spending. So the government creates inflation and then they punish the private market to cool it off. Absolutely outrageous behavior from our federal government over the last 4 years, which brings us to the situation that we're in now, where we saw the Republicans and Donald Trump win the election by a landslide, win the popular vote, win the Senate, and win the House of Representatives. So absolute embarrassing mismanagement of the federal government over the last 4 years. None worse than what they did with inflation. They just couldn't help themselves. They continued to spend and spend and spend in the face of growing inflation. But if they didn't spend that money, they would have had absolutely nothing to use as evidence that they should be reelected, right? So if all the Democrats can do is spend money that we don't have, they at least have to continue to do that and then try to spin that into a positive thing to win reelection. It didn't win this time around, and in fact, all of the bills that they signed, those trillion-dollar bills, they wouldn't even speak of them during the election because they were so unpopular. The latest cut comes 2 days after the election won by Donald Trump, a longtime real estate developer. Trump has criticized Powell's decision-making. In its announcement Thursday, the Fed said that it was lowering the new baseline target for interest rates to between 4.5 and 4.75%. Powell said at a news conference Thursday that the Fed is not on any preset course as it focuses on its dual mandate of maximizing U.S. employment while keeping the inflation rate around 2% over the long run. The Fed said it will weigh factors such as the labor market, inflation pressures and expectations, and financial and international developments as it considers potential further cuts. Powell said he would turn down a request by Trump to step down from his position if asked. Later asked about whether a president has the power to demote or fire him, Powell said that it is not permitted under the law. My understanding is the existence of the Federal Reserve is actually not permitted by the Constitution of the United States. So we might see how this plays out. There was some talk of abolishing the Federal Reserve late in the campaign of Donald Trump involving Ron Paul and others. So if the Federal Reserve thinks that they are untouchable, I wonder if there isn't some pushback that argues that they are touchable and the Federal Reserve itself is unconstitutional. We shall see. Let's keep moving. A Broadway office building sold for $16.5 million in 2021. The owner did nothing to the building and is now relisted for $34 million. This is Nashville in a nutshell. 810 Broadway, an office building, an old office building that sits between Nashville Yards and Lower Broadway. The asking price for the 5-story brick building is $34 million. The Broadway building is recognizable by the red Morgan & Morgan sign on the outside. The law firm had been the anchor tenant of the office building, but will be relocating to 19,000 square feet of space in One Nashville Place. All of the office tenants will be moving out by July of next year. Any buyer will likely convert the building to apartment, hotel, or restaurant use. Nashville-based Magnolia Investment Partners owns the building. The firm paid $16.5 million for the 0.4-acre site in 2021. The nearly 90,000 square foot building, that's a big building, is prime Nashville property, sitting at the entrance of Nashville Yards, a high-profile downtown development which is nearing opening. Right next to it sits the headquarters of the Southern Baptist Convention, which will soon be up for sale. At $34 million, the asking price for the 810 Broadway building is around $388 per square foot, which really doesn't sound that outrageous for that area of downtown. So I do think this building will trade. It'll trade at or near the asking price, and it will absolutely be converted to a new use. If I had to bet, it would be converted to a mixed use where you've got retail or restaurant uses on the ground floor, and above you've got apartments. But it could be condos too. There's a big push to condos right now. A lot of the financing that's available makes condos look more attractive relative to apartments. There has been very few new apartment starts in Nashville since 2023, 2024, which we're going to cover in just a minute. So a lot of folks would like to build apartments in Nashville, but there are some indicators that we were overbuilt, so lenders have really pulled back. So the guys that are owning that land, that are still trying to get those projects out of the ground, are being forced to convert some of those projects to condos, whereby they're sold to individual owners. And the financing for those types of projects is considered less risky, which is why you're seeing a lot of condo projects coming into the pipeline in downtown Nashville. Now, this is hopefully the last time I have to talk about the transit plan. I always called it the transit welfare plan because I don't think it's going to do anything to alleviate any type of traffic. But the reason that I'm bringing you this story this week is I don't think the average resident of Nashville understands the timeline and how long all of this is going to take. It's going to be excruciatingly long and slow, as we know the government is. 2/3 of Nashville voters approved Mayor Freddie O'Connell's multi-billion-dollar transit referendum. About 45 miles of roads and pikes, Murfreesboro, Gallatin, Dickerson, West End, Charlotte, Nolensville, Clarksville, and a few places downtown are poised for a $1.35 billion extension of overhauls, high-frequency service, and potential lanes reserved just for buses, making them faster and more reliable. It's a minimum. This is the part that I think is more interesting, because that wasn't overhauls, high-frequency service, and potential lanes reserved for just buses. Why potential? They sold us on dedicated bus lanes. High-frequency service just means 24/7, 365. I don't know why we're wording it so confusingly. Nevertheless, it is a minimum of 3 to 5 years of work on most of these corridors before construction could even start. So they're going to take a corridor at a time, and it's going to take 3 to 5 years of no shovels in the ground before they're even going to get started on any of this stuff. So I hope everybody's feeling real patient. Amongst the things that need to happen: community conversations around need and priorities, environmental studies, engineering studies and street design, potential need to buy right-of-way, applying for federal funding, which will be needed for most of the corridors. Not all can be built at once, given borrowing constraints the city will face. One corridor is primed to be a first mover, Gallatin Pike, between East Bank and Briley Parkway. It's a balance of aligning the community and street design conversations with our bonding capacity, which is the ability to raise money, and the grant programs that are at the federal level. The name of the transit program going forward will be known as Choose How You Move. They've recently hired, or are looking to hire, someone to kind of be the CEO of Choose How You Move and oversee this 15 years of work. All I know is y'all just better be real patient. You're going to start paying that sales tax increase, and it's going to be a 3 to 5 year lag before you see anything done with it. So, I don't live in Davidson County. I didn't get a vote, but the folks that do live there, they thought it was worthwhile. They thought it was worth $6.9 billion in 15 years of construction to what I believe is, not really have a measurable effect on rush hour traffic in Nashville. I don't think it solves the problem we need to solve. But then again, no one asked my opinion. The Nashville market is actually not oversupplied with apartments. The multifamily market in Nashville, Tennessee is seeking stabilization amid a record-setting wave of supply inundating the area. Over the previous year, more than 13,000 units have finished construction, the most ever on a trailing 12-month basis. So over the last 12 months, we brought 13,000 new apartments online, the highest ever for a 12-month period. Despite historically strong demand, rising vacancies, and stagnant rents, overall vacancy has spiked from a recent low of 5.3% in 2021 to a current rate of 11.4%. The saturated market has also hit landlords' bottom line as annual rent growth has turned negative this year, meaning rents have gone down slightly this year as compared to last year as a direct result of that supply and demand imbalance, right? We had this huge block of new apartments coming online, and it is taking a while for the market to absorb them. During that absorption period, rents have pulled back a little bit, and this is what lenders are seeing, right? And this is why lenders are not lending on new apartment product. I can tell you, I've been marketing multiple sites in Nashville that 5 years ago would have sold in an instant for an apartment development. And we've had a real hard time getting qualified buyers interested in those sites because of the lack of funding to do so. But a closer look at the data and the overall story of the multifamily market might change your mind. First, Nashville's population has grown over 27% since 2010, and continued growth shows no signs of slowing. Developers have been scrambling to keep pace with the market's housing needs. For example, while we are often compared to Austin or Charlotte, cities of comparable size, Nashville has had up to 100,000 fewer apartment units than either of those markets. So relative to peer cities, we're very underbuilt for apartments, is what that's saying. Then there's the spiking overall vacancy rate, which considers all units within the market, including those that have just been completed. When looking at the stabilized vacancy rate, which only takes into account properties that have been open for at least 18 months or have reached 90% occupied, it's almost 450 basis points lower at 7.2%. So the stabilized vacancy rate is only 7.2%. Looking at Nashville's apartment construction future, the pipeline is slowing. The once record construction has dropped to just 13,600 units underway from a peak of 25,600 units in 2022, the fewest units under construction since the onset of the pandemic. So that's, I think that tells the story, right? We had a real run on apartment development, much due to demand and the availability of financing. While demand has remained, the availability of financing has not. Developers are very much pulling back, and now the pipeline is got the fewest units it's had in construction since the onset of the pandemic. Nashville has had almost no new starts since 2023, and we are actually seeing strong lease-up velocity in certain pockets, such as Wedgwood, Houston, and Berry Hill. So while there is still work to be done on the downtown apartment market, positive signs are emerging. So I do think there are developers out there very eager to build more apartments in and around Nashville. The big challenge that we still have across our commercial real estate market is the availability of financing. It's not even necessarily the interest rate, it's just whether or not banks will lend at any interest rate. And banks have very, very much pulled back over the last few years, which has really dried up the pipeline for new construction, and it's really made it difficult to sell land priced, at price points that we're used to selling land in Nashville. If you're trying to really get the top of the market price for your land, those are the sites that have really been sitting for the last 1 or 2 years, because there's just not the available financing to build those projects. It's not that they can't buy the land, right? But they also have to finance the construction on the land. And if they can't do it all at once, generally they're not willing to buy the land. They need to most often secure the construction financing and the land financing from the same lender at the same time. Last story. Hyatt's new brand is all about construction costs. And in all my years of following the hotel business, I've never heard a new brand rolled out because it has low construction costs. The first Hyatt Studios is set to open in January 2025 in Mobile, Alabama. The brand has very strong interest, with more than 4,000 rooms in its pipeline and 250 deals in some form of negotiation. We made a lot of changes in evolution based on talking to people who actually build, the people who use, and the people who clean the room. Big real estate investment trusts are interested in the brand for its less expensive building costs, the lowest cost Hyatt build ever. The company has decided to target secondary and tertiary markets for Hyatt Studios. Hyatt is represented in 95% of urban markets, but only 10% of all small metro markets, hence the desire to fill in those underrepresented markets. So a brand that costs less to build, specifically designed for secondary and tertiary markets from Hyatt, which I think is very creative. Those big hotel brands do a pretty darn good job rolling out new products. They're constantly rolling out new brands. If it isn't every year, it's every other year. And to build a brand for secondary and tertiary markets based on the cost of construction, I think is very wise, given how that is really scaring off a lot of hotel developers, even in strong markets like Nashville. Well, y'all, that rounds out today's show. Those are the stories of the week, brought to you by Beechwood Commercial Real Estate Brokerage. Your brokerage, if you are a seller of commercial real estate in the Southeast. Please check us out at soldbybeechwood.com. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll talk to you next week.